Hey gang, hope you're doing okay. Today is Thursday, 3rd of March 2022, and as you can tell by the title, today I am talking about Pet Shop Boys' 19th studio album, HotSpot, and the period that runs 2019 through to today, including therefore the EP Agenda. It's a busy period, actually. One of the good things about Pet Shop Boys is, as a band, they've never really stopped. They've never really taken a huge amount of time off, and it's only in the past couple of years, thanks to the COVID-19 catastrophe, that we have been in the situation where bands haven't been touring, they haven't been releasing music, and so on and so forth. And it's been a long and hard couple of years, as I'm sure you know. You were there with it too. And of course, I started off doing these NOTCASTs in, I think, around about September 2020, when I thought this thing isn't going to go away soon. Anyway, I miss talking to my friends, so all my friends are now going to be an imaginary mobile phone where I kind of talk at you about bands that I like. Luckily, the good thing is, if I'm doing this to you in person, you can go, Mark, that's boring, talk about something else, or listen to me. Or flip side of that is, it would just be nice to meet people. So later on this month and the very beginning of next month, I am going to be very, very privileged to see one of my favourite bands live. Their first full band shows since Edinburgh in November 2019. The Twilight Sad are playing. I love them to bits, and I've barely talked about them on this channel. I will get to that in due course. And also today, being the 3rd of March, it's about 3 years ago today that I made the decision to make some life changes, to drink less and to be more considerate and less selfish. And I don't want to be boring about that, but if that's something which you guys are interested in hearing me, or gals for that matter, oh god, that didn't go well. If that's something you're interested in hearing me talk about, I can do that at some point. But we're going to start talking about Pet Shop Boys, because that's where I should be. Now, normally I talk about a band or an album of the band once a month. Recently, things have slid a little bit. Stuff's got busy, it's got real, and so therefore I've slipped a little in my usual aspiration. So I'm running a series at the moment with about 8 or 9 bands where I'm talking about each band's album chronologically. And the last time I talked about Pet Shop Boys, surprisingly, was I think the 30th of November 2021, which is over 3 months ago. Suffice to say, Christmas has happened. So today it's going to be HotSpot, it's going to be Agenda, there's going to be a number of other EPs which we're going to talk about. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about the band's Actually series. Well, not actually, Annually. Annually is a series of annual hardback books printed once a year, approximately 64 pages of text. Here's the 2017 version that came, I think, with the EP for the Inner Sanctum, or the what was it? I can't remember now. No, it isn't Inner Sanctum, it's something else. Burn, maybe? Anyway, it came with a CD EP. 2018 featured this. 2019's version featured this flashback to years gone by with an ancient cover photo. But this also had, by the way, a review of the Inner Sanctum release, and it also addressed the EP that was released in the spring of 2019, the Agenda EP. Commercial release of the Agenda EP is only on a 12-inch single and a download. If you wanted the CD version of Agenda, you had to get Annually 2019. And this was the CD single in a card sleeve. I think this is a really good EP. It's a really essential part of Pet Shop Boys' story. And if you can't get the CD is probably dramatically expensive on Discogs and even more expensive on eBay. So perhaps go for the 12-inch instead. Here's the only commercial physical release of it that there is, the Agenda EP here as a 12-inch. And surprisingly, it's still sealed. I've not opened it, primarily because I got the tracks as downloads. So I've never seen the inner sleeve of that. I really should open these records and listen to them. But right now, the oldest of the cats is sat on the record player, and I will not be able to do that in a hurry. And every time I wanted to listen to Agenda, I've been out. So I listen to it when I'm walking or something like that. The Agenda EP is kind of like a precursor or a stopgap in between the Super album and HotSpot. And Agenda is 4 tracks, all of which are themed around something to do with politics and the agenda itself. So the cover there is of a woman taking a selfie on a boat. If you've been paying any attention to Kanye West, sorry if you have, he likes to take selfies of himself on boats. He also likes to be quite controlling and narcissistic towards his ex-partners. But the Agenda EP opens with a track called Give Stupidity a Chance, which is opens with the line, intelligent people have had their say, it's time for the foolish to have their way. And I think it's a comment that's quite clearly about Brexit, around Trump, around North Korea, around social media, around conspiracy theories, around things and information where, as Michael Gove said, government minister, I can't believe he said this, said we've all had enough of experts. And I think that's one of the statements which really kind of led into the Agenda EP, was the idea around the democratization of speech because of the internet, although that makes me sound very much like an old man now, and about social media and so on. And what it has done is to remember that old quote, I think Churchill may have said it, which is, lies travel halfway around the world while the truth is still getting its pants on. And the thing where somebody lies or they tell things which are untrue, the person that is being, or the organisation or the event that's being lied about, firstly has to be aware of that lie, and then secondly they have to try and go, well, this is what really happened. So if somebody's spreading misinformation, lies and so on, then frankly it's harder for the truth to get out there sometimes. And the Agenda EP kind of details that very clearly, firstly with Give Stupidity a Chance, where it says we've all had enough of experts, and look where that's got us right now. The Ukrainian president is a former TV comedian, whereas the British Prime Minister is actually just a clown. I am no fan of Boris Johnson, but I do try not to get too political, but Agenda is a political EP, and there is no two ways about that. The second track on it, by the way, is called On Social Media. And on, I think it's a really brilliant use of the word there. There's always a degree of depth and thought to Pet Shop Boys releases, and having the phrase on social media is a double-edged sword. So the first one is around, well, if you've got a presence on social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, hello, you're on social media, but also from the point of view of an academic analysis or a thesis, is it's on the subject, and so it's like a discussion from a rational standpoint around social media and the good and bad that comes with it. And the third track is called What Are We Going to Do About the Rich? And that kind of addresses the gross inequality in respective wealths that various people have. Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, for example, busy putting together their gigantic blue space penises so they can throw billions of pounds up into space, whilst other people are starving because they haven't got £3.50. It's addresses the thing about inequality. And very recently, Neil Tennant tweeted about wealth inequality, and someone kind of said, "And what do you do about people that are worth £1 million?" Kind of trying to shame Neil Tennant, suggesting that he's a hypocrite because he's only worth tens of millions as opposed to somebody that's worth, say, £400 billion. And I think that it's a cheap shot, and it's not necessarily true, because while wealth inequality exists, it's not fair to compare somebody that's worth, let's say, 14 million to someone that's worth £400 billion, which, by the way, is the equivalent of me having £14 in my back pocket and someone else having £400,000 in their back pocket. And to accuse a person that's worth £14, scale is what matters. Proportion and scale are really, really important about this. And the last track on the Agenda EP is called The Forgotten Child, which is, to be honest, a fairly forgetful ballad. Not bad, just not particularly good. Each one of these tracks were released one a day on YouTube and streaming services over the course of a week. I think it was in February 2019. And then at the end of the week, the Agenda EP was announced to have a physical release. Here's the old 12-inch, and of course, the version with annually is the CD single, which is the only place to get a high-quality physical digital version of it. Pet Shop Boys are still in the place of being one of the very few acts that still release CD singles, still release physical singles, and still understand that a portion of their fans do really like having that shiny silver disc. And they kind of went a little bit quiet. They played some shows in Japan. They announced two shows, one at London's Hyde Park on, I think, the 15th of September 2019, which is to date their last live show, and an appearance at the 229 Club as well, which sold out in 5 minutes whilst I was walking from one building to another at my work, so I couldn't get a chance to go and see them. And that tied in with the release of Dreamland, the first single from the album HotSpot, a collaboration with Years and Years. Although Years and Years at this point have now just become one chap who I can't remember his name. But I think Dreamland is a fantastic opening single for the album. And if you look at the Dreamland here, 12-inch, and the CD single, they are, I think they're the same. They're photographs of the same object. But the Dreamland is very clearly designed. If you look at this, if you look at old-fashioned British railway stations from the early 1900s, let's think, I think it's Moore Street and Snow Hill in Birmingham, for example. Some of the old-fashioned tube stations that were built in the 1880s, they very much carry this sense of architecture around them, which is tiles, and it has this, and this is based, by the way, on I think a specific train station in Berlin. I forget which one. I wrote it down, but I can't remember which one it is now. But it's based upon a very specific set of architecture that's on the walls of one of the train stations in Berlin, where the album HotSpot was recorded. Dreamland is, by the way, a fabulous Pet Shop Boys song. It is one of the best first singles that they've released. It's a dreamy, idealistic song, and I think of it kind of like a sequel to Go West, because it's about a vision of a promised land, a place where you can go, where you can be free and love who you want to love. It's a dreamland. It's a place where your dreams become a reality. And it's also, by the way, clearly inspired by an amusement park in Margate. Margate is about 40 miles that way. I can get there in about an hour, where bands sometimes play, and where there used to be roller coasters and amusements and dodgems and things like that. And it's now become an open door entertainment venue. Biffy Clyro played their first post-pandemic show there in August, and I couldn't go because I was really very poorly indeed. If you remember the update from what seems like it seems a lot longer than only 6 months ago when I was in hospital, but there you are. And so Dreamland is, in my opinion, an absolutely fantastic first single. The single is also backed with 2 new tracks, An Open Mind and No Boundaries, and a couple of remixes of Dreamland as well. And if I remember correctly, An Open Mind also makes an appearance on another release, which I will get to shortly. But Dreamland is a fantastic Pet Shop Boys single. I strongly, I mean, if you like Pet Shop Boys, listen to it and then go, yep, it's great. But it is also, of course, a thematic sequel to Go West, a song about a place where dreams become real. This was followed up with a second single that was released from the album just before the album came out. January 2020 saw the release of Monkey Business, and this is a picture of Neil Tennant on a stairwell. Now, I cannot confirm or deny that this stairwell is the same one that Chris Lowe designed in Milton Keynes. It almost definitely isn't. But it's a proper commercial single, which was released as a CD, 12-inch and download. There is another single, I'll get to that very, very soon, but Monkey Business was the main pre-album single. Monkey Business is, well, it's a weird song. It's not my favourite Pet Shop Boys song by any stretch of the imagination. It's a functional dance floor banger that's designed to be listened to. It's in the same way that, for example, when I first heard Enter Sandman by Metallica, I was going, that's not a great Metallica song, that's a great rock song. Monkey Business is a great dance song. It's not necessarily a great Pet Shop Boys song, but Monkey Business originally came from the Super era. So during the recording of the track Pazzo from the Super album, Chris Lowe started working on what could have been a slightly different, funky set of riffs that could sit over a Pet Shop Boys remix of Pazzo, but they then decided instead to turn Monkey Business into its own track, gave it a new vocal, and it's the most funky, chunky, dance floory type track which the band have done for quite some time. Really reminds me actually of classic Daft Punk around about the time of After All. And the 2006 kind of tour, big chunky bass lines, fat synths. It could have been their Get Lucky, but obviously world events later on kind of stop that from being the case. But Monkey Business was, I think it's a really good song, not necessarily a great Pet Shop Boys song. And the CD single of it is backed with another track, a new one called At Rock Bottom, alongside a Friend Within and a Prince Thomas disco mix of the track itself. So it's pretty good. They did do, now this is the first time the Pet Shop Boys have done a done a commercial single release that hasn't been on a 12-inch since 1984, and a commercial single release that hasn't had a CD with it since 1986's Suburbia single, Burning the Heather. Still sealed in a 7-inch, by the way. Burning the Heather is a good, gorgeous, lovely soft ballad, which the band wrote. It's got Bernard Butler, formerly of Suede and McCormick and Butler, on guitar. And it's around the shrinking nature of friendships and circles and time. Burning the Heather, about, when I was 20, 25 years younger than I am now, so sometime in my 20s at that point, I had a lot more friends, but over time they show you who they are and you decide whether you want to be with them or not. Also, some of your friends are only friends because you go out and get drunk with them. They're not the kind of friends that you'd be able to talk to on a Sunday, for example, or on a Thursday. They're the type of friends that you would only see on a Friday and a Saturday. And I had a friendship circle when I was growing up in Birmingham. We met at a specific pub, the Pot of Beer. We met on a Saturday at a specific time, and that was the only place I knew them from. Never had their phone numbers. I never thought to ask. To be honest, I haven't seen any of them for 25 years. And, these were people that I would spend Saturday nights with, getting frankly fucked off my box, dancing to crazy loud music and getting incredibly drunk. But I didn't maintain or keep those friendships in a valid or meaningful manner. And I kind of miss that. I kind of wish that I'd kept in touch with them. But a certain thing happened to me in the year 2000, which I've mentioned in a previous Pet Shop Boys episode, actually. And I decided that Birmingham was no longer my home. The Midlands didn't feel like home. It felt like it turned on me, and I had to go somewhere else and start again in London, which is exactly what I did. When I think about some of the steps that have taken place in my life, sometimes they've been pretty traumatic, actually. But Burning the Heather is around how your friendship circle changes and it refines itself over time. And sometimes people are with you as for part of the journey for only a few years, and then they kind of go off and have their own adventures. And other people, they stay with you until you grow old, until you die, and then they're, the people that you know. Burning the Heather is a fine Pet Shop Boys song. Now, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It's not a single. It's when you listen to the instrumental version of it, you go, yeah, Pet Shop Boys album track. Really good Pet Shop Boys album track. Maybe not a single. But Burning the Heather was only released in a physical form as a 7-inch, and it is backed with a previously unreleased track called Decide. Decide is brilliant. It's one of my very, very favourite Pet Shop Boys tracks of recent years. And every once in a while, Pet Shop Boys release a track where Chris Lowe sings and everything gets funky, beaty and bouncy. Decide is exactly that, by the way. And it's a brilliant song. And Decide also has a download-only Sia mix, which is basically an old-fashioned extended 12-inch version. I strongly recommend listening to those. And on my resequenced version of the HotSpot album, Decide is one of the album tracks in the middle of side 2, and it just gives that album that little bit of oomph that you really, really need to make it happen. So there's 3 singles before the album's come out already. What's the album going to be like? Well, I think it was released February 2020. The album was called HotSpot. If you bought the album from the Pet Shop Boys store during one particular week, you got a signed art print of the cover. Here is my copy of that. So that's a signed kind of print of the album art. I bought 2 copies, one on CD, one on vinyl. The other art print I gave to a friend of mine who had no signed Pet Shop Boys stuff. Hi Ed, hope you're doing all right. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Been a while. And this print sold, I think the word is like hotcakes. If hotcakes sold rather a lot, they sold thousands and thousands and thousands of copies of the album, and therefore had to spend a long time signing copies of this, and they withdrew the offer after a certain period of time. I think because they thought the band members would, Neil and Chris might get RSI from writing the autographs so many times. But no, it was worth buying it from the official store. And HotSpot came out on a LP and a CD. And again, I haven't played the LP actually. I'm sorry about that. Forgive me. I've been struggling with things during the COVID period. I think it's fair to say, with the absence of my social life and with music and things. So to me, HotSpot feels like it came out about 2 months ago, although it came out over 2 years ago, because the band haven't played any live shows. I've not seen any live shows by them. The album was pretty much released, and then 6 weeks later, everything was shut down thanks to COVID, and the album was pretty much dead in the water. And the band's tour, which was called the Dreamland Tour, has now been postponed from May 2020 to May 2022 and has become a greatest hits tour as well. There's no guarantees that the album, it's basically the only album that the Pet Shop Boys haven't toured in any substantial fashion since about 1987, when obviously Actually was released. I dimly remember that far back. But let's talk about the album actually, because I think it's a great title for the album, and the title HotSpot has a number of meanings. There was an LP version, there was a double CD version, and the double CD version came with instrumental mixes of the tracks. Most bands prepare instrumental mixes of their material so that they can then play back the music on television shows or public appearances, and only the vocals need to be live. So this, alongside there was another album which had an instrumental version of it, Elysium, for example, had an instrumental second CD with it. But it opens with a track called Will-O-the-Wisp, which is, I think, the perfect opening track for the album. The HotSpot album was recorded at Hansa Studios in Berlin in the autumn of 2018, which means when I toured Hansa Studios in the autumn of 2018, they might have been 2 rooms away, and I had no idea whatsoever. The name HotSpot, I think, is a really good name for the LP. All Pet Shop Boys albums, apart from the live album Inner Sanctum, have a single one-word singular definitive title, and HotSpot works on a number of levels. Firstly, hotspot implies somewhere where you can get public access to Wi-Fi. It's a term that's become interchangeable with communication. So hotspot itself kind of implies that this is a communication from the band. The second part of it is, if you are in a hotspot, it's also regarded as the place to be, the place to see and be seen. So this is where it's at. This is what's happening, as to paraphrase LCD Sound System. And then the third part of it, it's a little bit dirtier. It's a hotspot is sometimes what's known in the trade as a nightclub or a meat market where you can go and meet people, and if you're interested in a transactional, sometimes shallow sexual experience, you can go to a hotspot and meet somebody that does that, and you don't have to bother with swiping left or right or anything like that. I, of course, too old, far too boring for that nonsense, and have been for quite some time. So I only found out that by reading about it on the internet. The cover art is a photograph by Neil. It's a reflection in a mirror of the band members at an art museum, and it is blurred. It kind of implies a degree of heat. So if you think about when you look at objects that are far away in very, very hot temperatures, the air itself is distorted by the heat, and then you've got the image there of the band members standing, but in a distorted fashion. It feels like there's almost like a heat wave that's distorting the vision. It's a very clever and thought through kind of implication here, but it's a great idea. And HotSpot is also the third album of the trilogy of the albums that have been recorded with Stuart Price, starting with Electric in 2013 and Super in 2016, and now HotSpot in 2020. So I think it's a thematic kind of closer for this. Now, the one thing I will say about HotSpot, from a production point of view, is whilst the production is very good, the CD version of this is smashed to fuck, to use technical terms about the mastering. It's very distorted, lots of clipping. Do not think that the CD is what was recorded. The mastering is brutal on this. It makes Deaf Magnetic sound like an Ed Sheeran gig. It's not well mastered for CD. The vinyl version clearly is a little bit better and more sympathetically mastered, but it's still quite loud. It's a loud cut, and it's got some distortion, and it blurs some of the edges, and it blunts some of the textures in the production. But there you are. That's me moaning about the album. It opens with Will-O-the-Wisp. Best track to open the album. I think actually it's probably the best single Pet Shop Boys album opener since Axis was very good. But before that, probably For Your Own Good, actually, which is a brilliant track to open the album with. But Will O' the Wisp is kind of like it's a sequel to 2 divided by 0 in one respect. It carries a train motif in the lyrics. It makes a reference to the U1 underground in Berlin, and it mentions, I think, the Bergerstrasse or something, a particular um, tube stop on the station. I was just checking to see if there was a lyric booklet. No, there isn't. Sorry, I can't double check that. I have to rely on my memories. And it's also taken from it samples of the Berlin Underground, the U1 line. There's also the U2 line, which, by the way, I have been on, and I have been to the zoo station at Berlin's U2 line because, of course, I'm a U2 fan, and you may have seen some of the other videos where I talked about U2. So from what I remember, the samples from the Berlin train station are from, is it Nollendorf Platz, I think, which is apparently a part of Berlin that was has some connotations that goes with it. And it also is inspired by a thing that Chris read in, I think it's a story or a poem called Ghostlight by Christopher Isherwood, which is about a Berlin visit in 1946 after the Second World War, where he had a vision of a former lover who didn't recognise him. So thinking after the war has happened and you haven't seen somebody for a number of years, and you see somebody and they don't recognise you, and suddenly they're gone in the crowd, they're a face in the crowd that's disappeared, one of the crowd, and then it feels like they've been forgotten by you. And I mean, it's a relatively small world, although you wouldn't want to walk it. And there are times when I've seen people that I thought I knew, and I may not have wanted to speak to them. I may not have had anything to speak to them, or I may not have, as far as I was concerned, they might have been dead to me, to use pop bitch wordsing. And I think that this song kind of touches upon a similar type of thing, where you realise that somebody that is still alive but is dead to you is a ghost of your past. The dead are, what is it? The dead are not alive, but they're still here. Whatever the lyric is in the track "Leaving" from Elysium, it's kind of almost calls back to that as well. It's also, by the way, inspired by Pete Tong's Heritage Orchestra. They did a show where they had a techno night at maybe the O2 Arena with an orchestra doing orchestral versions of tracks that were big in the 90s. And Chris Lowe went to that and was inspired by that when he was writing the music for Will O' the Wisp, but was also inspired by Jeremy Deller's Acid Brass. And if you haven't heard of Jeremy Deller, he's done a fantastic couple of things. He did a book about the Manic Street Preachers in a very limited run called The Uses of Literacy. He did a thing called The Posters Came from the Walls, which is a documentary about the appeal of Depeche Mode to people behind communist state lines, such as East Berlin and places like Ukraine or wherever in the late 90s. But also Jeremy Deller did a thing called Acid Brass, where he would do brass arrangements of contemporary tracks, like, for example, What Time Is Love, Chime by Orbital, for example. And that was one of the inspirations, which is now, frankly, being shamelessly ripped off 20 years later. Now the disco kids have become disco dads, and they listen to classical music because they're refined, and they listen to Radio 2, not Radio 1. That's where perhaps the inspiration for Will O' the Wisp came from. Unfortunately, I think this album is very poorly sequenced indeed, because after that, Will O' the Wisp, and the name Will O' the Wisp is a kind of like an English phrase, which also means like a face or a light or something that you see in the fog that never becomes clear and disappears, which ties in with the lyric and the idea from the Christopher Isherwood story. Isherwood, not Esherwood. Esherwood is an E, Isherwood is an I. I have to remember the difference between Bath and Bath. If you say Bath, you're not posh. If you say Bath, you are, apparently. Anyway, the album suffers from a sequencing failure at this point, because track 2 is You Are the One, which is a classic Pet Shop Boys ballad, a soft, slow love song, but it completely sucks all the energy out of the room. If you're going to be following up Will O' the Wisp, in my world, I'd follow it up with Dreamland, and then I'd follow it up with Monkey Business, and then I'd follow it up with Burning the Heather. So, you've got 3 fast, chunky bangers to start with. But no, track 2 is You Are the One. And You Are the One it's an okay ballad. Pet Shop Boys could do this stuff in their sleep. It's an outtake from the Super period. It was originally recorded then. It's reminiscent to me of a similar track called The Only One from the Nightlife album. And it has samples from the film Eight and a Half and Call Me By Your Name. Eight and a Half is a film about a man who is a film director who is obsessed with a love that never quite works out. And Call Me By Your Name is a popular film about a gay love affair in, I think it's Rome in the 1960s, when such things were probably frowned upon by the Pope and the Catholics. So it's an interesting song. I think it's a song that I admire more than I like, is probably the best way to describe it. Not a great song, but it's in the wrong place on the album. Track 3 is Happy People. And again, this brings the tempo right back up. Say you've had a banger, suddenly you've stopped, then you get started again. It's kind of like being in a traffic jam where you think, now I have to sit here for ages. I've got about 30 seconds of like going fast and then I have to stop again. That track 3 is Happy People, is great, and it's followed by Dreamland, which, as I've said before, is a Pet Shop Boys classic, and I think is a thematic sequel to Go West. The track 5 is Hoping for a Miracle, which is, again, it's a slow song. It slows the album down. I think it's in the wrong place on the album. It's about a promise of something that isn't going to come to pass. It's one of those songs which, again, like The Only One, and like I Made My Excuses and Left, and some other songs, it's not a song that people come back to and go, name a Pet Shop Boys song, and no one's going to go Casanova in Hell, apart from Rufus Wainwright fans. And Hoping for a Miracle is not great, not at all. Sorry guys, it isn't. Track 6 is I Don't Wanna Go Out. Man, these guys saw the future and they didn't even know it. I Don't Wanna was released as the 3rd official single, or the 4th actual single from the album HotSpot. This was released about May 2020. May 2020. We had been instructed by the government that you shouldn't do any unnecessary travel. All retail shops, apart from I think supermarkets and chemists, were closed. If you needed to buy a door, you couldn't buy a door. If you wanted to buy a record, you couldn't buy a record. You had to order it online. The only place you could buy shoes was a supermarket. The only place you could buy jeans was a supermarket. Everywhere else was closed. And so to release a single called I Don't Wanna Go Out was either genius, prophecy, or madness. I can't decide which one. Maybe the song was a little too on the nose for people because it didn't really chart. The Pet Shop Boys singles just don't chart anymore. They're 60-year-olds rampaging around thinking you're still going to be able to make it in the charts when you've been around for 40 years is quite ambitious. Very few bands get to do it. Not even U2 get to succeed at that. I tell you what, guys, now, even if the Beatles were all alive and still releasing records, they would not get in the top 20 anymore. They absolutely wouldn't. All their fans would be old, knackered, and dead. Sorry, guys. I'm a Beatles fan now. It's taken me a very long time to get to that point. But even if the Beatles were still together, they wouldn't be getting in the top 10, let alone anybody else. So I Don't Wanna is the 4th and final single to come out from the album, and it felt prescient of the things that were happening in the world at the time. And without even knowing it, they had a song on an album which is about having to not wanting to go out but wanting to stay in and not do anything at all. Fascinating, actually, in terms of an idea, but sometimes they give you exactly what you need and you don't even know that's exactly what you need. I Don't Want It is followed by the rather chunky, funky Monkey Business, which I've mentioned previously, chock full of Daft Punk style bass lines and big thumping bass. Great track, Monkey Business, probably a complete banger live, but since the band haven't played a live show since then, I can't tell you whether it is or whether it isn't. I have no idea. None of us know, apart from the band themselves. We're just on the cusp of playing a show. I think they were maybe 6 weeks away from starting a world tour and had to pause everything in March 2020. Following on from Monkey Business is Only the Dark, which is so forgettable. I remember nothing about this song whatsoever. Then there's Burning the Heather. And the last song on the album is Wedding in Berlin, which is it's a lovely song. It's got an interpolation of the well-known Wedding March, alongside a separate track that the band have written, which they wrote for the wedding of two friends. And I now think about this song. Every time I hear this song, I think about some friends of mine that have got married. I know one of them likes Pet Shop Boys, and I'm like very, very happy for them. And I'm like, that's brilliant, that's lovely. It's such a lovely thing to have memories from your lives attached to songs. So every time you hear the song, you think about people that you haven't been able to see for years. And you know that they're having a fantastic time, or hopefully they are. I hope you are. But I suspect you won't be watching this because YouTube is not your type of thing. I'll tell you sometime. But Wedding in Berlin is a lovely song, and it's the right way to end the album, I think, on a note of happiness and togetherness. So you kind of think about the other albums. The last track on an album is really, really important, but the Pet Shop Boys totally nailed it with this one. Wedding in Berlin is completely the right combination of joy and optimism that you need to end an album on, especially in the midst of everything else that's been happening in the world. Wedding in Berlin was written for the May 2015 wedding of, I think it's Tyler Heinzmann, and it is relevant because there is a district in Berlin called Wedding, and obviously having a wedding in Berlin with the district. The whole album is very much kind of like the Pet Shop Boys version of David Bowie's Berlin period. The album was recorded in Berlin. It makes numerous references to places and locations in Berlin, and it also has sounds and details taken from the Berlin kind of train station and area, as well as obviously including on the cover of the Dreamland single an adaptation of the architecture of one of the Berlin metro stations. It's very much a Berlin record, and I'm very, very pleased about it. You can probably hear a cat meowing there. I think Price wants to come in. I'm going to press pause and see if he wants to. Hang on. So, I've opened the door. I'm not being moaned at anymore by a small black cat. I think it's just the idea, as soon as you shut a door, as he tells you off, he's like, I want to come in. I want to see what's going on. Well, if you want to come and have a look. This isn't going to be very exciting. Hang on, I'm going to show you this little dude, who I absolutely love to bits, who has been interrupting a number of my meetings over the past few months, and my video calls, and now one of my videos as well. I suspect he isn't going to hang around too much. It's very much, he loves us on his terms, and that's the way he is, although he's not, as you probably gathered, particularly averse to human contact. He prefers it if I would explode into a pile of biscuits. Following on from the album, I Don't Wanna was the single, which I've mentioned here. CD single has a track called New Boy on it, which is a recording of a very old Pet Shop Boys song from the 80s, alongside 3 remixes, 2 by David Jackson and 1 by Mano Litoff. There was also a 12-inch single, which is all remixes and the Pet Shop Boys mix of the track itself there. And of course, like most things, it fell straight out of the charts very quickly. It was probably a bit too pressing. Oh, are you all right? Do you want anything else? You can come up if you like, little dude. So the band carried on. They released online an EP called Music, which was a continuation of the Closer to Heaven soundtrack. It's like a 20 years later sequel to Closer to Heaven, which featured 6 songs sung by Francis Barber, including re-recordings and remixes and updated versions of Run Girl Run and Friendly Fire, alongside 4 new songs. But that was only available online as a streaming downloadable release. It wasn't physically released at all. There was also bundled with, actually 2020 was the first new Pet Shop Boys music after the album, apart from the single, and that was the My Beautiful Laundrette EP, the soundtrack to an updated staging of the classic play My Beautiful Laundrette, featuring 7 songs written and recorded by the band, including a reappearance of the track No Boundaries, which appeared, I think, on the B-side of Dreamland, and this was the music for the original stage production. The only place you could get this in any physical form is this CD, which came with annually 2020. I keep calling them actually, I shouldn't. And it's 7 songs. It's not amazing. It's available. You can listen to it and hear it online. And you can go, wow, I probably won't pay a fortune for it on Discogs. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Pet Shop Boys never do a bad thing. They do some things which are perhaps less amazing than some other things, but they never do a truly bad thing, in my opinion. And then things went very, very quiet for a while until the release of Annually in 2021, last year's Annually, which again features a lot of photographs and a question and answer session and diary extracts and a walk through London with the band and that type of thing. But it also featured a CD. This time it's the Cricket Wife EP. The Cricket Wife EP features 2 tracks. One is the Cricket Wife, which is a 12-minute instrumental alongside a largely spoken word piece by Neil Tennant. And the B-side of it is the lockdown version of West End Girls, which was recorded at home remotely by the band members and broadcast for a fundraiser on YouTube. But the Cricket Wife EP is pretty good, but it's not amazing. The last thing which has come out so far is this Pet Shop Boys remix of Paul Weller's Cosmic Fringes. They did the Triad mix, which is 12 minutes long, and they've turned a frankly fairly mediocre track by a now washed up former member of the Jam into a 12-minute epic about life in Britain. Called the Cosmic Fringes. They've added vocals, they've completely re-recorded the instrumental part of the song, and frankly it's fantastic. There is not a bad Pet Shop Boys remix out there, and the Pet Shop Boys have recently announced that they've recently remixed the new single by Wolfgang Tilliams, and today they also announced a split single or a joint single with Soft Cell called Purple Zone, which nobody's heard and we've only seen the cover art for it. That brings us up to where we are in early 2022. To me, HotSpot still feels like an album that came out, days ago, as opposed to over 2 years ago, because there've been no live shows, there's been no performance, there's been nothing like that whatsoever. Everything's gone quiet. The whole world has been in a form of suspended animation for pretty much 18 months, from March 2020 through to July 2021, and it's only now, slowly and surely, that things are starting to open back up again. So that brings us to the end of my talk through all the Pet Shop Boys albums and releases over the past 40 years since they met at an electronic store in Tottenham Court Road in 1981. And now I am going to wrap up this period with my friend here, Price, the Black Cat, who's going to make me feel like I'm Blofeld from the James Bond films. And now I've told you about my evil plan, I'm going to conquer the world using a series of NOTCAST largely about disco duos. And there we have it. I'm going to wrap up here. I feel like I really raced through that today. But there's a lot to talk about, I think. And I didn't want to get too kind of stuck into any one particular thing. I have a cat who's now looking at me somewhat attentively, wanting to know why I'm not going to fuss him. He's also camera shy, aren't you? Do you want to say anything? No, he doesn't. He wants to headbutt my ankles. It's nice to know that I have a purpose in life, according to His Highness. I now have to go downstairs and go and get him some biscuits. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I will hope to see you all in person soon. And many of you I will see at shows in the coming months in and around the south of Britain. For those of you who are watching outside of Britain, it's going to be a while till I get to you. I'm not going to travel just yet. But it's a good thing that the world is much, much smaller thanks to the internet and to YouTube and everything, that I can stay in touch with people from all over the world, which I hadn't necessarily always thought was going to happen. Oh, no, I definitely am required to provide some ear rubs and some scritches for the cat. You can't see him, but believe me, he can see me and he's making sure that I need to give him some fuss. So look after yourselves and I will see you all soon. Okay, bye.